I'm ready.
All right, welcome everybody to the implementation of the IEP and advocacy part 3 in our IEP webinar series. My name is Erin Camper and I am one of the parent advisors at Peak, and I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A throughout the presentation and hopping in if I have something to add. Before we get started, I'm going to go over a few items about participating in today's webinar. You will be muted for most of the presentation. You can utilize the chat, and if you have a specific question, you can put that in the Q&A. However, this is an overview, and we will move pretty fast through the information. If you have a very specific question regarding your personal situation, I will put the information for the parent advisors in the chat, and I believe it's also at the end of the presentation, and we would love to speak with you and talk to you about your specific situation. Closed captioning is available, and if you need interpretation, please click on the globe at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. And you will receive an evaluation after the presentation today, and we really appreciate your feedback. We are recording this presentation today, and their recordings will be posted on our website. And now we are ready to get started, and I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Ann Wilson from Peak Parent Center.
Thank you, Erin, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. If anyone would like to introduce themselves in the chat, please go ahead and put your name, your location, your role, if you're new to the process. Again, my name is Ann Wilson, and I work on a variety of projects with Peak Parent Center. And I'm also the parent of a student who had an IEP, so sometimes I'll share some parent perspective as well. Peak Parent Center is a federally designated parent training and information center, which is required by IDEA that every state have at least one. So even though we're talking about the detailed legal framework and the law, Peak Parent Center is a training and information center, and we don't provide any legal services or legal advice. This webinar is for informational purposes only. So as Erin mentioned, this is part 3 of our 3-part series. We started out with IEP basics, evaluations, and eligibility. And then last week we talked about development of the IEP, including the contents. And then today we'll look at the actual implementation of the IEP and advocacy. And if you missed any of the prior webinars, they will be posted on our website for you to watch the recordings. So the implementation of the IEP is the actual delivery of the services and supports outlined in the IEP. And it's important that parents are meaningfully involved in the IEP's implementation, not just in the meeting, but also in the implementation. And that school personnel understand their responsibilities and have the skills and training necessary to deliver the supports and services as outlined in the IEP. If you're a parent, as a parent, you are an important part of the IEP team throughout the time your child has an IEP, not just when the meetings occur. So communication during the school year is important. Today, we'll talk about the actual delivery of supports and services, the responsibilities, the progress monitoring, and I know we talked a little bit about that last week because it is outlined in the IEP. And then we'll look at managing conflict and the dispute resolution options that are provided under IDEA, a little about advocacy and family engagement, and then we'll share some resources. So after the IEP is written and placement is determined, the district is then required to deliver the special education and related services that are outlined in the IEP as soon as possible. There can't be an undue delay in providing services to the student. The responsibility is really shared by everyone who has a role in the IEP, but the general education and special education teachers share responsibility for implementation, as well as the related and support service providers, if they are defined in the IEP. And then all team members are responsible for kind of continually evaluating the effectiveness of the plan. Following the eligibility determination, it's expected that the IEP of a child with a disability will be implemented as soon as possible following the IEP meeting. But there's a reasonableness to this. So there are exceptions why that services might not be started right away. For example, if the meetings occur during the summer or a vacation period, then there won't be services provided until school's in session. If there are circumstances that require a short delay, there might be working out transportation arrangements, or if there's some assistive technology that you need to get, if there's training or something. So there might be reasons why there's a delay, but no undue delay is what the requirement is. The school district has some responsibilities, including following the legal timelines, providing parents a copy of the procedural safeguards, ensuring that parents have the opportunity to participate in the IEP process, making sure that those responsible for implementing a student's IEP have copies of the IEP, and then they need to provide the services as planned and documented in the IEP, as well as progress monitoring the student's progress toward the goals. If the student is in the transition planning time, outside agencies which are to provide transition services are monitored. And that doesn't mean that they're monitoring the services, they're monitoring that the agency is doing what is required in the IEP. And if for some reason that's not happening, there might need to make an adjustment. Also, periodic reviews take place as scheduled. There's the annual review, but there may be something in between if you need to make a change. And then the team will make adjustments if the student is not making appropriate progress. Parents and students also have responsibilities. You are responsible for communicating with the school about your child's progress in the same way that school is responsible for communicating with you about the child's progress. And if you're seeing things at home, it can be really helpful to take notes. I know sometimes for me, I feel like things are happening a lot more than they're actually happening. So like if your child's having issues, just if you can make a note in your calendar or something, just so you have some idea of how often something's happening and when it's happening. The student also has a responsibility to communicate whether the IEP is providing them with a meaningful learning experience. And that also is something you want to think about. Students, a lot of students don't really think about their IEP specific supports and services separate from school in general. So students can have a lot of concerns that may not be specific to the IEP. So you want to make sure you're getting a complete story, but you definitely want to find out what's going on with your student and be a good listener and try and get to the bottom of things. But I know as a parent, I've had a lot of issues that are really not related to the IEP. Sometimes it's just about a teacher getting my student or not getting a student. So kind of really try to get good information. And you can call for an IEP review if you feel your child is not making adequate progress. And we'll talk a little bit more about steps you can take. This is just a diagram to remind you. So we have the IEP meeting and develop the IEP, and then the implementation begins. And during that year, before the next annual review, you have progress monitoring. And we'll talk more about that. And then the annual review, and then in 3 years, you'll have the reevaluation. So progress monitoring is the ongoing process of collecting and analyzing data to determine the student progress toward the goals. And it should be used to make instructional and service decisions based on what's actually happening. So it is a responsibility of the IEP team. And as we talked about last week, it's outlined in the IEP. So you will have in your IEP what will be monitored, when monitoring will appeal, who will monitor, when and where monitoring will be conducted, and how that data will be reported. And often that coincides with grading periods at school. And we talked about there's a data management system for IEPs. So those progress reports are often done through that data management system. Why do we want to monitor progress toward goals? So we have data. We want our decisions to be based on data. So we want data to assist in making decisions about instruction, as well as determining the baselines, the current level of learning behavior and performance, and to measure progress toward those goals so we can kind of see if what we've planned is working. The benefits are that parents and students know what's expected, and they know kind of when they're going to hear things. It gives teachers an organized record of the student's performance. It helps the whole team know what's working and not working based on data. It should be provided in an easy to understand way to show parents the progress. Visuals can be really helpful in that regard. And then the IEP teams have comprehensive data on student performance for the decision making, whether you need changes or if you just want to see how things are going. So you bring in this team together, and everybody has different roles and different views. So the IEP process in itself kind of involves conflict. And so we want to think about conflict as something that can be really productive to help us develop a better plan of supports. And so this just is a diagram to think about. Unhealthy conflict is, you versus me, whereas healthy conflict is you and me towards the problem. And so in the IEP context, we really want to keep the focus on working toward what's best for the student under the circumstances and what's available. So with that in mind, conflict does occur in the IEP process. And so we're going to talk about managing conflict. There are things you can do that are informal that aren't specified in the law. And then IDEA specifies 3 dispute resolution processes: mediation, state complaint, and due process hearings, which we'll talk about. If possible, it is beneficial to resolve conflicts informally because it involves less time, less energy, and dollars, and that can be used to support the student. So one thing that can be helpful is to use an interest-based approach when you're thinking about a problem. A position is what you want to happen. It's a surface statement of where you stand. For example, it's the I want this. Maybe I want to have a one-to-one pair up for my student. And your interest is really, why do you want that to happen? Why is that important to you? What's the reason, or what are you hoping to gain from that? And if you have an understanding of both, it can give the team more to work with. So in the example, if you wanted a one-to-one paraprofessional, what's the reason you want that? Maybe it's that you want your child fully included in a general ed classroom, or you want them participating to the maximum extent possible with non-disabled students. And so thinking about what your why is can really give you more to work with the team, because the team may have ideas to help you achieve that goal that are different from what your position is. So if you kind of go in with an idea of what you're hoping and maybe even some alternatives, that can often help discussions go better. We have a handout that you should have received, but if you did not receive your handouts, please put your email in the chat, or you can send it to Pam or Aaron, and we can send you those handouts. But there is a handout about a list of actions that you can take to resolve special education concerns informally. But generally, you want to gather information related to your concern to make sure you have a complete picture. Also, use available resources. Aaron mentioned our parent advisors at Peak Parent Center. They're a great resource if you want to just kind of talk through what you're seeing and can find out, is this an IDEA concern, or what is this? And then the Department of Education also has parent information lines too. So kind of gather information about what the context is and make sure you have a complete picture of what's going on. Usually begin by meeting informally with the lowest level person involved in the problem. That might be a teacher, a case manager, or a service provider. If you need to sort of go up a level, it could be the building administrator. There are also direct special education directors in all the districts. And so that might be someone that you might talk to if you need to feel like you need to raise it to another level. You can always request an IEP meeting. when you are working through these situations, remember to monitor emotions. I feel like we say that a lot, but emotions can really drive conflict. And so, because the process can be very emotional, really pay attention to what's going on with your emotions and try and figure out how to use those emotions in a productive way so you can get the best result with your team. Be polite but direct, explain the problem as concretely as possible, and ask for help in solving it. A lot of times I know when I talk to people on my team, they'll want examples, and sometimes I just feel like things aren't going well, and then in the moment I have trouble coming up with specific examples. So that's why taking notes can be helpful. And then ask for data or other objective materials that are relevant to the problem being addressed. If it's a subject in school, if you're concerned about literacy, or if you're concerned about math, ask for some data on that area. Try to keep the focus on what the child needs to make progress, and as much as possible on objective information. So one of the informal ways to resolve conflict is CDE's Alternative Dispute Resolution Project. The mission of this project is to provide a funded support system and toolbox of options for all special education stakeholders in order to make the process more collaborative and improve relationships. Uh, Conflict in special education has been increasing, and so alternative dispute resolution is a promising practice that a lot of states are using now. In Colorado, there are ways to engage with the ADR project. The first is, we hope that all members of the IEP team will be using facilitative skills, and I'll kind of give an overview of what those are. Some districts have developed facilitation capacity by taking trainings with CDE. If you want to check to see if your district has that, you could check with your special education director. And then there are impartial facilitators through the Department of Education, and you can request those for your IEP meeting. The facilitative skills, a lot of them are just good communication skills, but some of the trainings cover active listening, and that's skills like paraphrasing, mirroring, and reframing. Strategic questions, on that we kind of try and focus on open-ended questions, but really trying to understand what's going on before you respond or react. Positions versus interests, I mentioned earlier. Recognizing sources of conflict. A lot of times in our situations of conflict, there's more than going on than just with the IEP, and so kind of understanding what can cause conflict, as well as resistance. Sometimes resistance comes up if there's cognitive overload. So we know that there's a lot of information in IEP meetings, so if there are ways we can reduce cognitive overload by, like, for example, giving evaluation results ahead of time, if that's possible, so that you can go over that and not have that in the meeting. A lot of this takes time too, but there's some great tools. The facilitators also use a lot of charting and visuals, and that can really help during the meetings. Another thing that the facilitators do is to create an agenda. A lot of IEP meetings sort of follow the IEP as the agenda, but they reach out, and if you find out if people have specific concerns or something they want to address, and if you know that ahead of time, you can plan for that and make sure you have adequate time. So when you do use a facilitator, this is an optional service. That means that it's not required under IDEA. It's optional that states what they choose to do. It's a voluntary process, so you can't make anyone do facilitation. The parties have to agree to do it. And either party, meaning either the schools or the parents, can request it. The goal of the facilitator is to sort of facilitate the meeting. They're there to focus on the process and promote effective communication and participation, with the goal of developing an IEP. In some ways, they free, if someone on the team is running the meeting as well as trying to participate in the discussion, this sort of takes that role away. And it's provided at no cost to parent or school. If you are interested in requesting a facilitator for an IEP meeting, you can just go to the CDE website. The link is in the slides in the handouts you should have received. But I just search CDE ADR and I can usually get to this page. And there's a button and you just request the facilitator by filling out the form. CDE will then reach out to get the consent of the parties. So facilitation, as I mentioned, is not required by IDEA, but it's kind of considered the lowest level dispute prevention option. And then there's the three options provided by IDEA. So there's mediation, state complaint, or due process. And we'll talk a little bit more about each one of those. Mediation, also like facilitation, is voluntary, meaning that both parties must agree. It's done by a trained impartial mediator, again, at no cost to the parent or school. It's not done in the context of the IEP meeting. It's a separate meeting, so it has to be at a timely, convenient location. And if the parties reach agreement in the mediation, then they'll write an actual written agreement that's legally binding, and the discussions are confidential. So some of the differences between facilitation and mediation is that the facilitation is focused on developing the IEP, kind of trying to keep things forward facing. The mediation is to kind of resolve an issue and come to an agreement. It is possible to have a mediation where you don't come to agreement, and that would be an impasse, and then you could look at the other options. The state complaint is, I like to think of it as an investigative option. It's sort of an investigation. You can file a formal written complaint with the Department of Education. They do have a form for the complaint if you want to use it. And again, the CDE website has a lot of information on these three options as well. And the state complaint can be about an IDEA or ECEA violation that occurred not more than 1 year prior to filing. So you might file a complaint, but it's actually not a violation of IDEA or ECEA. And so it might not be appropriate for state complaints. So sometimes that happens. But once the proper filing of the complaint, they will initiate an investigation by state personnel. So if you file something, you might get a response that this isn't something that you can file a state complaint about. Or they might say, we can look at this, but not this. This can be best for procedural and implementation problems. And then the state can order compensatory services, teacher training, or changes to policies. And then the third option is a due process hearing. This is more of an adjudication. This is where you present your case and someone makes a decision. So it's an administrative hearing conducted by an administrative law judge, and it's more of a formal trial-like process with witnesses and documentary exhibits. It can cover an alleged violation of IDEA or ECEA concerning identification, evaluation, placement, or provision of FAPE within the prior 2 years. So you can have a longer period that you're looking back. This can be best for resolving significant differences in opinion about whether child is getting is receiving FAPE in the LRE. And the judge can order compensatory services, reimbursement, future services, but not money damages. You may be required to have a resolution session before the due process hearing. Parents have the burden of proof, meaning that they must prove the violation. And then you can appeal the decision in state or federal court within 90 days of the decision. So the approximate timeframes, typically mediations are completed within 30 days of a mediation request. A state complaint, a written decision is issued within 60 days after the properly filed complaint was received. So just be aware that that doesn't start running until the complaint is properly filed. For the due process hearing, they must convene a resolution meeting within 15 days of a properly filed complaint, unless there's a reason that they don't have one. That period may continue for up to 30 days. If no resolution is reached, a hearing must be conducted and a decision issued within 45 days. So you can see there's a preference to try and work these things out if you can. If you appeal the ALJ's decision in state or federal court, that process can take months or years. So that's a long process. And so these dispute resolution options are provided to kind of give a relatively quick solution, since we know how important it is to keep our students in school and working toward their goals. In addition to the IDEA options, I think I mentioned this in our first session, IDEA is the special education law for students ages 3 to 21, but there are civil rights laws for students that protect students for disabilities, and that's not specific to the ages. It depends on the context. So you may also have civil rights issues, and that's separate from these IDEA processes. But if you want to learn more about civil rights in education, you can contact Disability Law Colorado, or the Office of Civil Rights has a Denver office. So why advocacy and family involvement? This quote is very old. It's from, I think it's from the 70s, but Corey Moore was an advocate, and she said, "We need to participate, not merely be involved. It's, after all, the parent who knew the child first and who knows the child best. Our relationship with our sons and daughters is personal and spans a lifetime." And I think that key part is that we do know our child best. That's why parents are involved in the IEP process. And also, parents were there at the beginning before IDEA kicks in, and parents will be there after IDEA ends. And so you are the person that's sort of there year to year as your IEP team composition changes. So your role is really important. There's a lot of research on family engagement and how important it is, not just for students with disabilities, for all students. Children do better in school and schools get better. Children stay longer in school. Students are more motivated to do well. It helps families gain an understanding of how schools work, and families can support schools and also hold them accountable. And in general, children and youth's lives change for the better if they have good family engagement. Also, collaboration is a high leverage practice for students with disabilities. And there's a link there. There's a website that they've looked into high leverage practices. And collaboration is really important, both among the school team members and also between families and schools. What are we advocating for? We want to build productive, positive relationships with others. And remember, we're also modeling for our kids how to build relationships with others. It can increase the flow of two-way information, so the school's getting good information about what's going on, and you're also receiving good information, and you can highlight issues before they become larger issues. To participate at all levels of decision making. And we think about, we're working on our own child's IEP, but we also probably can see things in the system that we wish were different. And so we can also be an advocate in the larger context. And I think that's one of the things on the handout. There are committees you can participate in your SEAC. You can get involved with understanding what legislation's happening so that we can improve the system that we're all working within. And we also want to ensure that student needs are met, and we want to build community partnerships. So there's a lot of benefits to building these relationships. Some key points to remember for the 3 series is know IDEA and how the IEP process works. Sometimes it's just hard to, is this an IEP issue? Is this a general education issue? So just really knowing, the more you can know about IDEA and how the IEP process works can help you work toward stronger goals for your student and things like that. So know what goals you have for your child, not just your annual IEP goals, but have that, that vision of what you're working toward. Write specific and measurable goals. Stay in communication with the school, and then try to use effective communication and advocacy strategies. If something isn't working, speak up. Sometimes, I know I've been sort of tentative sometimes, like, is this a real problem? Is this a problem to mention? And I'm not sure. But I think sometimes it's just better to just have that conversation. And also just definitely don't wait till your annual IEP meeting to bring something up. If something's bothering you, if it seems like something's not working, let your team know. So if there's an adjustment that can be made, that it can be done while there's time in that before that annual meeting. Get support when you need it. This is a hard process. It's a hard system to work in. Take advantage of resources. Parent advisors can help you connect you with other resources as well, not just the support on the IEP question. And then focus on building and sustaining relationships. You know, when our kids are in a school, they'll be at that school for a long time. And so think about your school as a community and how you can build and sustain good relationships for your student throughout their experience at the school. We have a list of resources. These are general resources related to the IEP, the CDE dispute resolution information. They have a nice table where that compares the options. And then I mentioned before the cadre, the Center for Alternative Dispute Resolution in Special Education, have a lot of great resources. We also have resources at Peak Parent Center on our website, and we have these are ADR projects. We have a specific ADR page. It's a work in progress, but we want to continue to add to that. So please share feedback if you have any, but we're working on that, trying to make resources that respond to questions that parents have related to alternative dispute resolution. And then the CDE Alternative Dispute Resolution Project also has its website that has a lot of good information for IEP meetings. Save the date. Our Peak Parent Center Conference on Inclusive Education is coming up April 17th and 18th in Denver. It's a Monday and Tuesday, and it'll be at the Renaissance Denver Central Park Hotel. That's a great way to meet other people and to learn some good strategies and get more information. And I think, let's see. Our registration page is open, and I don't know, is that did they just go to the website and then click connect? There may be a pop-up on the website, but anyway, if you're interested, please register. And here is our contact information. Erin mentioned the parent advisors, parent advisor at peakparent.org. It's great to have that one-to-one conversation with someone when you're not sure what's going on, or just to want to talk through issues. So with that, I think I went through that fast. If anyone has any questions, happy to answer.